broadcasting live. I'm recording it back up, gentlemen. Do you guys have a kind of a opening phrase we can use? Everyone ready with your opening phrase?
Just forget to do that. I gotta
No worries.
my weekly work.
Yeah, I mean, I have something.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Really good.
You got something? We ready?
Mhm.
We ready? We
Don't do
ready.
that.
This is Slash Filmcast episode 604.
We just will never stop.
Never stop, never stopping, guys.
Exactly.
All right, here we go. Backup's
really wish I
running.
went
We
to
are
that
broadcasting live.
Yeah.
In 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Slash Filmcast. I am David Chen, and I get uncomfortable when movie protagonists refer to my people as yellow-skinned. Joining me today is Devindra Hardawar.
Coming to you live from virtual Sundance. It's not very cold here. Yeah.
And also Jeff Kanata.
I am also a creature that comes by once every generation.
Welcome to the Slash Filmcast, ladies and gentlemen. Today on the podcast, of course, our main review is going to be The White Tiger, new film that's out right now on Netflix. But before that, we got some what we've been watching, some interesting reflections on the new nature of the Sundance Film Festival, and then some weekly plugs for you as well. In the After Dark, we have nothing really planned. We got some COVID-related talks. We got some movie festival-related talks.
really
Got some
selling
stuff.
it, Dave.
I'm really selling it. Yeah, you're welcome.
Nothing
Jeff.
planned. Maybe we'll talk about COVID.
Yeah.
Tune in.
Yeah, that's how I play. That's how I go, Jeff. That's how I roll. So you're welcome. You're welcome. Anyway, you can find more episodes of this podcast at slashfilmcast.com. Email us at slashfilmcast@gmail.com. You know, Jeff, I've started to realize over the course of the last 2 years, very slowly, that our approaches to introducing podcasts are really different. You know, I listen to DLC quite regularly. Jeff Kanata likes to amp people up. He's like, "Welcome to DLC," you know. And I'm more of a understating
More of
kind of guy.
Make them
More of
leave. Want to make
Yeah.
them leave.
Yeah. No. Because
So
because
only
more
the
of an-
strong keep
You're
listening.
kind of
yeah.
an under-promise, over-deliver guy, right?
you know, it's easy to get them from the start, Jeff. Harder to drive them away and bring them back. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I get it.
Oh yeah, this is true of
No,
movies as well.
it's a brilliant stratagem.
Oh, thanks.
Make them think there's nothing to listen for.
Yeah.
And then little by little, slowly confirm that.
Precisely, Jefferson. Well, I'm glad we're all aligned, and we can get going with the show now. So let's talk about what we've been watching this week. I want to talk about a couple things. One of them is that I watched The Little Things, which is the new movie that's out right now on HBO Max. It's the first movie of 2021 that's part of Warner Brothers and HBO's kind of dual release strategy, day and date strategy, right? Where it's out in theaters and it's on HBO Max for a month. I unsuccessfully tried to make this a main review of the Slash Filmcast, and I think that's for the best because this movie's pretty terrible.
I looked at that trailer, Dave, and I was like, did somebody just unearth a movie from the 90s and try to sell it today? And apparently that's what happened, right?
Very true. First of all, you got 3 Academy Award-winning actors in this movie. Denzel Washington, Jared Leto, and Rami Malek, right? And you're thinking to yourself, okay,
It's great. It's stacked.
It's incredible. It's incredible. Like how could you could not ask for more when it comes to
Can't mess that
Detective
up.
Denzel. Detective Denzel, whenever he's in a movie.
Denzel.
It's great.
Detective Denzel.
It's great.
Yeah, it's so good. You got John Lee Hancock, the guy who's directed some pretty great films, including The Founder, The Blind Side.
I like The
pretty well,
Founder.
you know?
I think really just The Founder.
The Founder
You're really
was-
hyping that up.
The Founder was pretty great. I really like The Founder. It's a great film. So you got all this stuff going on for this movie, and at the end of the day, as Devindra indicates, it feels like a movie that came straight out of the 1990s, probably because it was apparently written in the 1990s, and
Yes.
apparently the script was not changed at all before they made the film and released it in 2021.
Is it set in the 90s
Yes,
still?
it is set in 1990. So
It's ridiculous.
I think they said, I saw some speculation on Twitter that they set it in 1990 just to avoid needing to update the script for like iPhones and stuff.
Brilliant. That is brilliant.
Yeah.
That is. I think that is called efficiency, fellas.
Yeah,
I know.
True
You know what I
laziness,
mean?
True
It
laziness.
becomes a
yeah.
period
You have
piece,
a-
but the thing is that,
You have a
that
perfectly good script. Why waste all the time updating it when it's just introducing problems into your script?
It's just a little dated. It's still good. It's still good.
All you need is a little chyron at the beginning saying 1990. Boom,
And
boom, we're done.
some Nirvana on the soundtrack. Yeah, we can sell
Boom.
this.
okay, first of all, I actually think it ends up being more work than you think because you have to have all the vehicles be from 1990. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
yeah.
So it becomes like a period piece. So like I think in the end it ends up biting them. You know what I'm saying?
The flannel budget alone.
Okay, I don't know what that's about, but I mean,
That's a grunge reference, Dave.
I see. I live in a city where literally
That's still
people wear flannel to like
I mean,
black
literally
tie
where it was
dinners.
created.
Yeah, the
It is
birthplace
where-
of grunge right
yeah.
there.
Yes,
Come on.
yes. So, okay. So what
The
is
90s are alive and well and living in Seattle.
That's right. The dream of the 90s is alive in Seattle. So the problem with the little things, I would say a couple problems. Denzel is always great, but I would say Rami Malek is hopelessly miscast in this movie. I mean,
He looks ridiculous.
He-
He looks
he-
like a child in detective clothes.
okay. I mean, that's not wrong. You're not wrong. But yes, I mean, it's a bad sign when the first minute this guy's on screen, I'm like, is he the killer? Even though he's the detective that's supposed to solve the
That's
person's
just
crime?
Rami Malek. That's just
Ruh-roh.
Rami Malek's
I'm not
eyes.
saying
Like,
I'm
come
not
on.
saying whether or not he's the killer or not. I'm just saying like that was immediately where my mind went to.
Which is
Yeah,
literally
you know,
his appeal, by the way. Like that is the appeal of Rami Malek. It's like you don't know what to do with this guy's face. I love him. I love him so much, but he's also like inherently untrustworthy because
It's
of
the
those
same
eyes.
thought I had
Yeah.
when I started watching Bohemian Rhapsody. It's like, is this guy
Yes.
the killer?
And
The Killer Queen.
and then Jared Leto plays basically a creepy dude who's the primary suspect of his murder or this
So real life,
as a serial killer.
real life
Yep.
Jared
so,
Leto.
So
Yeah.
playing not against type, and he's supposed to be like a blue collar mechanic in this movie that has like a pot belly and a limp, but it seems like he's just wearing like a costume pot. You know, it doesn't. I don't think he gained like 50 pounds for this role. I think he just like put on some padded clothing and stuff. So he just looks weird, you know, and his whole it seems maximally calibrated to weird you out, his performance, right?
Well, that sounds like how you get Jared Leto to sign on to your movie.
Indeed.
Yeah,
You
how
know?
weird is it?
Yeah.
You want a pot belly and a limp, bro? And he's like,
Yeah.
oh, no, yeah, now I'll sign.
Yeah. So the thing is, Denzel Washington, guys, you may recall, was almost supposed to be in the David Fincher film Seven.
Mhm.
He was supposed to play Detective Mills, who was eventually played by Brad Pitt. And it has felt like he has been trying to make Seven ever since that movie. Like, look at all the serial killer movies he starred in since then. You got movies like Fallen and The Bone Collector, you know, and like he's been in multiple movies where he plays a character that's trying to catch a serial killer. That trend culminates with The Little Things, which is such a carbon copy of Seven that, like, if I described to you all of the plot details that were similar, you would probably be shocked. This would be one of the boom goes the dynamite for the ages. I'm not going to do that because it would spoil The Little Things. But
It's a Boom Goes the Dynamite as a movie.
yes, I mean, suffice to say, you got, you know, older black detective, this time played by Denzel Washington, who's kind of taken this younger, cocky
Oh, man.
white detective, played by Rami Malek in this case, under
Poor,
his
poor
wing.
Denzel, by the way, like lived long enough to be the Morgan Freeman in Seven.
Yeah,
apparently.
yeah,
Man.
and you know, they're trying to solve a serial, like they're trying to find and catch a serial killer with these like series of unsolved crimes.
Does he leave clues? Please tell me he leaves clues.
He leaves
a calling
some,
card.
He leaves some clues. He leaves some clues.
Oh man.
But anyway, so but the thing is, it's obviously not as transgressive as Seven. So actually, I went back and rewatched Seven after watching this, and I mean that movie still holds up. It's incredible. It's like one of my
Pretty
favorite
good,
movies of all
yeah.
time.
It really
Uh-huh.
is.
So well
So good.
done and so haunting. The ending is just perfect. The casting, Howard Shore's score, Darius
Seven
Kanji
was
was
so good. It
cinematographer.
basically broke the serial killer movies. Like it started with Silence of the Lambs in the 90s, right? And then Seven just like kind of one-upped it, and then it just felt like a lot of Ashley Judd movies at that point.
The best way to think of this movie, the best way to think of The Little Things is Seven is a movie that came out in 1995. And, that movie did pretty well. It made $327 million worldwide box office. And everyone, like, think of all the movie studio magnates in their offices chewing on cigars and say, get me some more of these Seven-like scripts, you see? And so then they went out and tried to write these movies that were like Seven, of which The Little Things was one of them. And then just by like historical accident, the movie just didn't get made for 25 years.
Yeah, it's basically the Key and Peele Trolls 2 sketch of of
Wow.
a Seven follow-up. It sounds like.
Deep cut, Devendra. Deep cut.
I mean, come on, classic sketch. But also, apparently Spielberg passed on the script. Everybody passed on it, from what I hear. Ridley Scott passed on it. Yeah.
The movie, in my opinion, adds very, very little to the detective genre, and let's just say, in light of all that's happened in America in the last year, and how we as a society are reevaluating how we perceive police and what the role of media is in perpetuating our image of police, I find it to be highly problematic, and I'll just leave it at that. So, The Little Things. It's streaming right now on HBO Max. I did not care for it, but some people thought it was okay. You may enjoy it. It's always nice to see Denzel playing a cop, though. I mean, you can't turn that down, right?
Make the real Inside Man sequel. Apparently, there is like a direct-to-video Inside Man 2
Yes.
that already exists, but I want that real sequel. Come on.
You want to inject that in your veins.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Sundance. This Sundance Film Festival is going on this week. Devindra's been really in it. I have been. I have started to get into it, although I failed horribly, and I'll tell you exactly. So, when I first saw that Sundance was going online, I was like, well, I don't know if I can do all this work to watch these movies, because
the work of buying a ticket and clicking a button in your web browser.
okay,
yeah.
you say you mock me, and that's fair, completely fair.
Uh-huh.
But also, it's a lot of work to go to film festivals because you got to decide what to see.
Sure.
And
The hardest work. Yeah.
yeah, it's taxing, and so I was like, do I want to like get into this? And also, I didn't know like how hard it would be to like actually watch movies. Like, I tried to see movies at like virtual TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival this year, and like found that experience to be really challenging because there are some movies that were like, this movie can't play outside of Canada. So it's like, okay, well, which movie? I just want to watch some movies,
You know,
guys.
Dave, you do know somebody who has been dutifully doing a lot of work to plan and prepare and talking with people in Sundance that you never engaged as you were dealing with all these questions.
Is that a person, a co-host on this podcast? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, maybe.
Is his name Blef Blanata? No, I'm just joking. Okay. So what happened was, Devendra, I saw you talking it up, and then I saw literally all of the people I follow saying like, "Hey, I just saw this movie at Sundance. It was incredible."
The
Then I saw-
FOMO got you.
Yeah, the FOMO got me.
That was it.
Then I saw that Coda, a film that premiered at Sundance, had been sold for a record-breaking $25 million to Apple TV Plus.
Yep.
Which is like pretty eye-watering price for a movie, and it's also kind of somebody on Twitter described it as a signal flare into the sky to be like, guess what, filmmakers, like Apple TV Plus is a place you can go to tout your wares. So that was pretty
it was Palm Springs last year, right?
Yeah,
that
Palm
kinda
Springs.
did that.
I think it was over like $20 million sold last year. So these are like massive deals, and. So then I'm like, okay, and also Devendra, you talking about it on last week's episode of the podcast. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna look into this.
Where I believe David Chen's response was, "Pah, looks like garbage at Sundance.
Okay, I
no
was
good movies.
talking about the virtual reality experience, but yes. Okay, look, hey, I'm eating crow on the podcast, Ravindra. So I decided to investigate. I'm like, oh wow, there's some really cool stuff on here. Now, here's what I'm gonna say. I think the schedule on the Sun. So as you're listening to this,
Yep.
it is possible to go to the Sundance website, buy tickets, and then watch movies on your computer, right? Which
I
is
think only the last day screenings.
yeah. So
pretty
like
much, like, the
previous day
stuff.
is what you're saying, right? The previous day of screenings you can watch, right? Or if they're
so
premiering,
okay,
right?
okay.
Yeah.
So
go
it's
ahead.
confusing, and they're doing virtual like a whole bunch of folks. There are premiere screening times for a lot of films, and those have a 3-hour window of when you can view them. Then there are second day. There's like
Right.
a second time to watch it. Those last for 24 hours. So if you're listening to this on Tuesday, February 2nd,
You can
or
watch all
February
of
3rd,
Monday's movies, basically. Right?
there's a chance. Well, there's a chance you may. It depends on like the time of the day and everything. But
Right.
hey, give it a shot. See what's available.
Yeah, and there's
Now
some
let me
rules-
ask you guys this question.
Yeah, what's up? Jeff?
Mhm.
Why? like, I mean, I get it. I get it when it's a film festival that takes place in a city that has theaters that you go to, and there are times to see a thing, but I mean, I understand this sort of prestige level. Oh, you have to be there at a time, but it's just manufactured. All of that is completely arbitrary. And, why not just let people buy a ticket to Sundance and watch whatever they want for the week or whatever it is?
Yeah, go ask John Sundance, Jeff. Okay, like I don't have the answers to these questions.
I think his name is actually Jake Sundance, Devendra. But,
Jake Sundance.
but
no. Well, I think there is actually a reason for it, because if you look at what's happening on Twitter and everything, right? Like there is a controlled amount of buzz at specific times. So hey, if it was just like a Netflix free for all and our brains were just froze up with the amount of things to watch, I don't know if there would have been like that same sort of like buzz for certain things, because
I guess that's
everybody wouldn't be
true.
watching it at the
Right.
same time. Like,
yeah,
I
I
guess
I guess
agree.
that's true.
I agree. So,
But I also feel
that's-
like the whole idea of this is a little ridiculous.
hey
You know,
man,
that-
I want to believe movies are still alive, Jeff. Okay, like we had a year
Okay.
where I couldn't step
Sorry.
into
Yeah.
theaters. I want this business to survive. So looking at these movies, looking at Apple saying like, hey, $25 million for this thing, it gives me hope for the future of cinema. That is why I am really doing this. And also I've convinced Engadget that we can do a lot more Sundance coverage now that it's virtual. So,
Yeah.
that's me. That's why I'm doing it.
yeah,
All right, I
Jeff.
don't wanna-
Why do you like hate everything about?
I'm
what we
sorry.
are?
Jeff is
I don't
just
mean to
doesn't
point
care
out the
anymore.
emperor has no clothes. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay,
I
so
don't mean-
I
Let me
wanna-
tell you about Hollywood, Jeff, and that whole industry.
I
It's
want
not great.
to. I want to finish, like, follow up with a couple things Devendra said about
Yeah.
the thing, right? So, like, the experience is when a movie premieres. So, let's say a movie's premiering at like 7 p.m. tonight. You have a 3-hour. You can buy a ticket. You have a 3-hour window with which to start it. Once you start it, you have then 4 hours to complete it. You can pause it. You can
Yes.
rewind it. But then after 4 hours, regardless of what you're doing, you must complete it.
And
So
you
you're
only get
allowed
once.
exactly
Yeah.
one container of popped corn, no more, no less.
Well, so this happened to me where I purchased so let me just finish the thought, which is that
Mhm.
it is kind of manufacturing the kind of online buzz that a film festival would generate,
Yep.
right? Which is to say, these quote unquote online screenings, they sell out. I tried to get a ticket to that Nick Cage movie, and I had it in the cart. And before I could check out, it was sold out. And it's like you can't
slow.
buy any tickets to the Nick Cage
There's
thing
only
anymore.
so many bits to deliver, man.
There's-
Can't do it.
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
bandwidth is so precious, Jeffrey. Bandwidth is so
Yeah.
precious. So so the things can sell out. You must watch it within a specific time frame. And
Wait, you guys joke, by the way, but that is literally true. The bandwidth costs a lot of money to turn a little thing of Sundance that has like 300 or 400 seats of people to, hey world, just come stream this thing like we're Netflix or some shit. Like that is a whole other different level of infrastructure and costs they have to deal with. So
It's
you know,
true.
Sure,
I'm
but
just
there's
saying.
like lots of platforms that can do that for you. It's not like you have to do it yourself.
I
don't-
mean, none that are theoretically, they need to like watermark all the,
Yeah.
all the movies
Yeah.
to make sure you don't like steal it, or if you do steal it, that you'll be marked with a scarlet letter because you stole. Like it's not just as simple as let's upload these to Vimeo and put a password on it. Like it doesn't work that way. So I actually, that's a good call out, Devendra. But that said, yes,
Hey,
I
I'm
mean,
the tech guy. I will call this shit out.
that said, I did
Well,
work for.
yeah. I mean, there's plenty of like Oscar screeners do it, and
Mhm.
there's companies that who like specialize in that.
Yeah, for
I
like
think it's
100 people to go watch this thing. You know, like for a very
fair enough.
small
Yeah,
cadre.
it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah. So, um, let's basically keep disagreeing with Jeff until he gives up on this line of argument. Is what I really think we should do. So
So
anyway,
a normal episode of the show.
a normal episode. So basically, I purchased a ticket to go see Glitch in the Matrix, which is Rodney Asher's
Mhm.
new movie. And I'm like, oh, I'm really, telling my wife, I was like, I'm really excited about this Glitch in the Matrix movie. This should be really cool. And then I'm online late Saturday night, and I'm like, I can't wait to watch Glitch in the Matrix on Sunday, right? And
Uh-huh.
I'm online Saturday night, like editing some podcasts. And then all of a sudden on my Twitter feed, I see like a bunch of people tweeting about Glitch in the Matrix, like Glitch in the Matrix is a great documentary. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, I wasn't supposed to watch that until its premiere tomorrow night. I looked online only to discover I had purchased the ticket for the wrong day. Like I thought it was Sunday, and I had in fact purchased it for Saturday, and it was
Man.
11 p.m.
You
So
you
it
are
was-
so out of practice, Dave, of buying theater tickets.
Yep.
You just like you couldn't even get the date. It's
No,
amazing.
That's correct. So I got the date wrong, and it's 11 p.m. And I'm like, well, I can either lose the $15, or because by the time I wait till tomorrow, like the movie will have lapsed because of this
Yeah,
arbitrary
yeah.
rule that Jeff was talking about. Or I can stay up until 1 o'clock watching this documentary. So I stayed up until 1 o'clock watching the documentary.
That is a rough movie, by the way, to stay up for because it gets dark.
Yeah, it gets dark.
You
yeah.
know.
So
Yep.
let's talk about that movie right after this break for our sponsors. All right, so welcome back to the show. We are going to talk about some Sundance movies. I saw Glitch in the Matrix. So Glitch in the Matrix is a movie by Rodney Asher. Rodney Asher, I have enjoyed some of his other movies. I think he made The Nightmare. My favorite movie of his is Room 237 about The Shining. Jeff, you seen Room 237 by any chance?
I think so. Yeah, I did see that. Yes, it's the documentary about The Shining. Yeah,
It's just like a bunch of people sharing fan
like
theories about The
oral
Shining.
history.
Got the crazy theories.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Glitch in the Matrix takes an extremely similar approach to that, but instead of evaluating The Shining, it evaluates the simulation theory, right? Like whether or not we
Right.
are in a simulation, like we on this planet are living in a simulation. And if that's what you're looking for, if it's like, hey, I want to hear a bunch of randos, some
Yeah.
of who are very
Literally a bunch
well-credentialed-
of randos.
yeah.
Yeah.
I want to hear a bunch of random, some of whom are like very intelligent, very credentialed, and some of whom are just random people musing on the nature of simulation theory. Then A Glitch in the Matrix is going to be a movie that you will enjoy.
Yeah.
But if you are looking for something like more deep and like a more rigorous examination of whether or not it's true, for instance, evidence for and against, I think you'll be left wanting. Also, by the way, I discovered when watching this movie at the beginning, they reveal, I think, that Magnolia is going to be distributing it like later in February. So I was like, well, I probably could have waited and like bought this
Literally
movie.
February 5th.
Yeah. I could have bought this movie like for the same price, probably in like a few weeks. So I wish that film festivals would like put next to the thing, this movie will be available on HBO Max in 3 weeks, but that would kind of work completely against their interests. That said, kind of a bummer. I'm like, I didn't need to stay up watching this movie tonight. But
I feel like you can sum up simulation theory in like 3 sentences.
Mhm.
Does it need a whole movie?
Well, Devendra, you watched this movie. What'd you think?
Nope. Well, so yeah, I'm kind of with you. I do think this is a movie. I like the concept. I like the idea, and I think I always like Rodney Asher's movies more in theory than in like actually sitting through them. Like The Nightmare was just kind of about that was about people who thought they were being abducted, but it was actually more about night terrors, basically,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And Room 237, the theories are fine, but I'm not fascinated by this subculture of people who have super crazy theories about The Shining. That does not reveal more about the movie to me or anything.
Well,
And this seems
I would
even-
argue that Room 237 kind of
Yeah.
by juxtaposing all the fan theories in the way that it does transcends like just being about these randos talking about The Shining, and it becomes more about like the nature of fan culture and the death of the author and things like that, you know. But that's because they're talking about a work of art, right?
Yeah,
Like this
something
is,
that is exactly, and something we've all seen,
mean,
you know,
If
dozens
you believe
of
in
times.
simulation theory, they're also talking about a work of art.
But no, this movie is it's too much of randos talking about sim theory. He does get Nick Bostrom in, you know, the guy who basically
Yeah.
wrote the paper that a lot of our you know, discussions are based on. That's why Elon Musk and a lot of people talk about it. It is a really interesting concept because if you think about who we are as human beings and how we tell stories, um this idea has existed with us forever, since Plato's, you know, idea of
Allegory of the Cave,
shadows,
right?
allegory of the cave and shadows on the wall, like the idea that we are living in this some sort of, what the reality that we're seeing is not real. You know, Descartes, a lot of people have explored this. I don't think this movie kind of does much with it. And then at some point, not a huge, I'm not going to say like there's something really sad,
there's some really
crazy that
dark
happens.
material in the movie.
Yeah. And there are certainly, it does start to explore the idea of like, okay, what if somebody really believes this and somebody is really into the Matrix and shit just gets real, you know, like in ways that are super dark. This movie got really dark and I did not expect that all of a sudden. I feel like tonally it's a little all over the place. I would have liked it to be deeper because there is something to think about here. And also the idea, like, which is where I kind of personally lie, is that it doesn't fundamentally matter to our daily lives, right? Like if we're living in a simulation or not, it doesn't, because like our real world morals, the way we live our lives, the way we relate to each other doesn't change. It shouldn't change. This movie does bring up the idea that some people who believe in sim theory will just like become animals. Like any sense of society or civilization they have just disappears because apparently reality is not real enough for them. So I would have liked more of that. I would have liked exploring more of that, talking with the deeper guys. I feel like Elon Musk, he would have been a big get for a movie like this, but somebody else, you know,
he was hanging out in Clubhouse instead, I think.
Yeah. What a shit show that was. Yeah.
I mean, I have not seen this movie, but I am a huge fan of Nick Bostrom and his writing.
Yeah, he's great.
And my understanding of his position on sim theory is it's just probability. His position is like, unless you think there's some great cosmic filter where, you know, human beings are going to die out, then there will be a point at which a sufficiently advanced civilization will be able to create a synthetic version of the world. And if you believe that's the case, then there will always be more of that than there are actual people in the world. So the probability is we're that. That's just probability, right?
Yeah. Do you believe that? Do you believe that?
I think it's a compelling argument, but I'm with Devindra. Like, it doesn't actually matter, right? If the simulation is, my experience is attempting to minimize suffering in the world, right? Whether that's suffering that's incurred from a simulation or suffering that's incurred from actually living in the world, it doesn't matter, right? As a human being, my goal is to minimize suffering with myself and others. And so that it doesn't change, right? It doesn't change. If the experiences that the input that I'm getting is manufactured or it's legitimate, it's still the same input and I have to deal with them in the same ways, right?
Yeah. Let me tell you guys something fun, by the way. Like, this movie briefly shows a clip of George Hotz, aka GeoHotz, one of the original like iPhone jailbreaking hackers. It shows a clip of him doing a session at South by Southwest in 2019. I sat in on that thing, and he just sounds like a madman. But it is a really entertaining presentation to just go watch, because it looks like a kid who just comes in from nowhere, right? He just like stumbles into the stage, has not prepared at all, and just like starts talking for an hour about his idea of sim theory and his goal of breaking the simulation. And it was the strangest thing I've ever experienced at South by, and I've experienced some really strange things there. So I would have liked to see more of that, because the world needs to see more of what this guy did. You can find his thing. It's called Jailbreaking the Simulation with George Hotz. It is on YouTube right now. But like more of that, more of the wild kind of ways people are dealing with this right now would have been interesting in this film, rather than randos in CG avatars.
Right. I'll just say one last thing about this movie, and the reason we're talking about it so much is because like you will actually be able to see this movie shortly. But the thing is that Rodney Asher's approach to filmmaking has primarily been like, hey, I'm gonna juxtapose a bunch of different perspectives on this topic in a fairly interesting way, and like one could argue that the way in which I'm juxtaposing these topics is like me saying something about this topic, right?
Yeah.
But he himself doesn't really intervene. He's not like Morgan Spurlock. He doesn't get in there and say like, well, I think simulation theory is like this. You know, like he doesn't do that stuff. He just lets the people talk for themselves and lets the way it's edited and assembled like make the point for him. And I'll just say, I think we're starting to see the limits of that approach with this movie, right? Because I think that with something as like sweeping and as all encompassing as a topic like this, it just is like, at the end of the day, it's somewhat hard for me to get a sense of what he thinks on it. But also, I felt like I needed a more of a guide through this topic than I think what this movie offers. That's just a thought, though. I just saw this, a couple nights ago, extremely late at night. So, but in any case, Glitch in the Matrix, the name of the movie. Rodney Asher, very talented filmmaker. If you have no idea what simulation theory is, I actually think this is a good movie. But if you've done some reading about it already, you've explored it a little bit, I don't know that this movie's going to add that much. So it's Glitch in the Matrix. I saw it at Sundance. It'll be available, I think, February 5th.
February 5th, yeah.
I don't know if that's like quote-unquote in theaters or streaming or whatever, but you'll be able to see it at some point soon. You know what? Let's go to Jeff first, actually, before we go to the rest of your Sundance slate here. Jeff, what have you been watching this week?
I used a resource that I love. It's called the hashtag.
You messed it up, Jeff.
I did mess it up.
You played yourself. You played yourself.
Hoisted on my own petard, as usual.
Yep.
The hashtag /tag, which is something I adore and often try to bring up on the show because I really, really find it useful. It is a hashtag that we use here on the show that you can use, dear listener, to suggest things to us, to suggest things to one another. It's a unifying force around which we can all share the best and the best of the watch-ins, the best of the streams. And I have noticed repeatedly a film come up as recommended. That film is called Black Bear. And I finally got around to watching it. It's been streaming on Amazon Prime, I believe, for several weeks now. I think even before the end of the year, people were talking about it as one of the films that they liked of 2020. I did not see it until this week, but I finally got around to watching it. Have either of you seen it?
Not yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I've heard great things. I'd also like to check it out. I think like Aubrey Plaza is doing some really interesting things in indie films. Like,
she is really, she's really blossoming into a really spectacular actress who takes challenging work and does.
Chances.
Yeah, I mean, there are chances taken in this movie.
Reminds me of like Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart, as well. Aubrey Plaza, probably the thing most people know her from is Parks and Recreation, is my guess.
Of course, yeah.
But she has like parlayed that into just really challenging, interesting roles in indie films. I love
she's somebody who
go ahead.
Let me just say, like, she genuinely believes in indie cinema in many ways too. Like, she's hosted the Indie Spirit Awards, I believe, several times. Like, she's out there promoting films, telling people to watch things, and kind of love that. Yeah,
I really liked her in Ingrid Goes West, which is a really fascinating exploration of social media in the influencer age. Anyway, what did you think of Black Bear, Jeff? Is this another thing to add to the Aubrey Plaza canon?
Do you either of you know anything about this movie?
No,
a bit.
I don't know.
I've seen the trailer, and
don't know any of the plot.
Well, then I can't really talk about it.
No, you can talk about it. You can talk about it. I'll take the headphones off. Go ahead. You're going to give away the premise of the movie, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And the premise is kind of everything.
Go ahead. If you don't want to hear the premise of Black Bear, tune out for the next 1 minute or so.
I can give you general thoughts. I found this movie fascinating, but absolutely baffling, and it didn't add up to anything for me. My wife and I watched it together. We sat up afterwards, looking up discussions online about it, debating it ourselves. So in that sense, like interesting, but ultimately our takeaway was like, I don't think it achieved what it wanted to achieve. And it is a movie that, man, it's so hard to talk about because there's a very fundamentally unique thing that this movie does that is everything, but I didn't know it going in, and I think it's important not to know it going in.
I see.
So, yeah, it is a very strange film, compelling in a lot of ways. I mean, it is up my alley in a lot of ways, like, you know, people in a room talking. I dig that. But man, it's challenging. It's interesting. It raises interesting questions. It does things very differently, but I wish it had more connective tissue to something resembling anything. Right? It doesn't end up giving me a thesis statement or any clues as to coming to a thesis statement. It just presents itself in all its sort of messy glory and asks me to do a whole lot of work. Now, I like movies that ask me to meet them halfway. I like movies that ask me to do some work, but I feel like this movie wants me to make sense of it instead of, instead of sort of connect dots that it leaves. It has dots. I'm not sure there's actually any connection. I don't know, but I'd love to have a deeper discussion with both of you about it at some point. It's just one that, like, even talking about what I'm talking about is kind of ruins the experience of the movie.
I think it'd be a good After Dark down the line.
Yeah, perhaps.
Well, I'm sorry you didn't have a good experience with this one, Jeff.
Well, I don't even know if that's the correct framing. It's not that I didn't have a good experience. I like I said, my wife and I were both engaged throughout. We were on the edge of our seats, but we kept waiting for the connections to be made, and they never came. And even in reading what other people came to about it, what people love about this movie, who love it, is that it doesn't have any clear resolve. And sometimes I like movies that do that. Sometimes I like movies that lay themselves in my lap and ask me to do all the work, but I just didn't think that even doing the work resulted in what I would like out of a movie. And I'm talking in very vague terms, but and so it's probably not particularly interesting to listen to, so I'll stop now.
All good. Well, the movie's Black Bear. You rented it, I assume, on digital, yeah?
Yeah, I think it was $7, something like that.
All right. Devindra, why don't you take us through one or two of your Sundance choices before we take a break?
Sure. So I'm going to list the things I've liked the most to the things I've liked the least. I think that's the easiest way to go through this. And the movie that stuck with me the most is Flea, which is directed by Jonas Pohur Rasmussen. It's an animated documentary because it's about the story of a guy, a man who lives in Denmark who is an Afghan refugee, and to protect his identity and so that his immigration status doesn't get messed up or anything, they chose to tell it this way. And I think it's a beautiful story of a man recounting basically how his life was destroyed by war in Afghanistan and the difficulties of his family getting to safety and finding safety and asylum in Europe. And it's incredibly harrowing, and I think it is worth the journey. It is one of those, I feel like when you talk about refugee documentaries or something, like, you're expecting something that is absolutely depressing, and this does have aspects of that because his family has to be basically be in hiding in Moscow for a while, and the stories of how they get out of there is just awful and makes me sick to my stomach. But I think this is ultimately a really hopeful documentary, and this is a story told from a place of hope. This guy is basically telling the story because he's on the verge of getting married to a man in Denmark, and is sort of like him trying to piece his life together in a way, like before he settles down to a peaceful domestic life. And I found it really fascinating in that way. The animation looks great. It's not like, it is kind of almost rotoscope looking, but it's really it's just like a really unique style, and they do intersperse live footage and news footage and things like that too. So I think it is a really fascinating portrayal of somebody who had to live through, the life of escaping Afghanistan and trying to find a new life for themselves in Europe, and how difficult it is, and how that experience will just reshape you, and change you for the rest of your life. I think it's definitely worth watching whenever it's available.
So the movie is Flea. It was at
Mhm.
Sundance this year, and I've heard great buzz about it. Hearing you talk about it reminds me of Ari Folman's film Waltz with
Yes,
Bashir, right?
yes, very much.
Which is also a documentary that's animated and also deals with like very dark and upsetting subject matter.
Mhm.
Would you is it a movie that like kind of reminded you of that one or?
I mean, a bit like that. This is, I think, a little more personal. Waltz with Bashir also had like gorgeous animation. That was a, like, very fluid, very fantastical film at times. Whereas
Yeah.
this one, I think, is a little more simplistic. But the story it's telling, and the way this man tells the story of his life, it is so like effective. So yeah, it's similar, but I think a very different style of animation.
Very cool. Again, the movie is Flea, and it's sold to Neon, so you will be able to see it at some point, probably the next year or two. And
Hmm.
Devindra watched it at Sundance.
Yep.
Devindra, tell us more of the Sundance movies you've been watching.
Another one I really liked is Users. This is a documentary by Natalia Almada. And I was looking at this from like the tech angle for Engadget, basically, because it's described as like a film that's about exploring our relationship with technology, the intended and unintended consequences of it in our world. And I expected something that was maybe a little preachy, but it's actually more of just like a tone poem of a new parent who is looking at how she is raising her kids, and the way technology is affecting her life, and how it may potentially affect them in the future. One of the opening shots is her baby in the snoo smart bassinet, which is this, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but it is this little robotic thing where you strap down the
Yeah.
baby into like, yeah, the little I forget what was the thing, but the little like burrito mode. That's the best way to wrap babies up. And you strap them into this thing. If they cry, it'll automatically make white noise sounds. It'll shake them to sleep. And for a lot of people, it's really effective. But she starts this documentary by just saying, like, before, when we used to have children, we didn't know what gender our kids would be. We didn't know when the baby would actually arrive. It was all a very basic thing. And now we've gotten to the point where we could stick our kid in this basket and hit a button, and it'll soothe them to sleep. This is a documentary that's really about exploring what we lose in kind of those situations. And it's not like she's saying don't do it, because like Natalia Almada relies on technology too for a lot of her work. It's a movie that's always kind of showing us the difference between the natural world and the technological world. It reminds me a lot of the Scotzi films, like Koyaanisqatsi. There is a bit of voiceover as she brings up potential topics and ideas from her life, but so much of it is just images juxtaposed next to each other with a great score that I believe was composed by her husband and performed by the Kronos Quartet. And strange to say this about a documentary, but incredible sound design. Like, I watched this thing with headphones, and just the way certain shots would hit me, like crashing waves, or I believe one was like a water treatment plant that was just so loud. The way this movie tells stories with like gorgeous imagery and really really impactful sound, I thought was really interesting. So yeah, it is one of those documentaries you kind of just experience, right? You watch it and your brain just kind of awakens in certain ways. It's something that's meant to make you aware of the fact that, hey, our lives, at least pre-pandemic, right? Things were pretty sweet. We could do all sorts of stuff in our modern lives, right? Everything was easy. It was all easy street for so many of us. If you could afford a high tech life, in a way, a modern life, things were so convenient and so easy. And this is a movie that kind of reflects on what we lose by making things so easy in a certain way. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'll be writing this up at Engadget as well.
All right, the movie is Flea. I'm sorry, you already said Flea.
Users.
Users, and it was
Yeah.
acquired by Film Constellation, which is a London-based production and financing company. So it seems like people will be able to see Users.
Yeah. I
Tell-
hope so.
Yeah, go
Mhm.
ahead. Go ahead.
Well, also one thing like about that sound design, they apparently got some money from Dolby, so they were able to master it in Dolby
Nice.
Vision and do Dolby Atmos sound. So I didn't hear that. Like, I saw a crappy little web stream of it, but I would rewatch this movie easily to see the full mix.
Yeah, so you bring up a couple things about the Sundance experience that I also wanted to mention to Jeff Kanata specifically. Number one is that there is one of the things that Sundance going online is able to afford us is that you can kind of experience that special feeling of being one of the first people in the world to see a movie, right? That's kind of one of I've been to Sundance twice. I loved it both times, even though it is extremely cold and brutal to like watch 5 movies in a day and then write like 5 reviews. But what's great about it is you're like witnessing, you're watching movies that people will be talking about the rest of the year. Of course, there's also a few stinkers in there, but like and also some of these movies may never get distribution.
Yeah.
Some of these movies people may never see again. And so there's something special about like being one of the few people to see a movie or being one of the first people to see a movie that even the online version of the festival offers. So I wanted to shout that out.
I've been to enough film festivals to have
you though?
a point of reference.
No, I'm just joking. I kid you. I kid you.
Yeah,
Why
I've had
would
that
you go to a
experience.
film festival, Jeff? I mean, it just seems like a complete waste of time.
Yeah, why not just wait for it to show up at the local multiplexes?
That's just not what my argument. My argument was the all of the arbitrary formation to create a situation where
Right.
Sure.
the
They're engineering
virtual
scarcity. They're engineering scarcity.
exactly. Yeah,
A
that's
lot
all.
of, like,
I wasn't saying
other
why do
thing-
people go to film festivals. Like I know that.
The other thing, by the way, is that a
live
lot of
that.
these movies head to Sundance and aren't acquired yet, right? So it is like you need that buzz, so somebody literally buys this movie, to
Yeah.
get it
Right.
distributed and everything. So
there were
there is
doubts.
that.
There were doubts that buzz would happen, but it has happened
Yep.
already. Like there are movies are selling. So the thing that is kind of a bummer, I'll just say about the Sundance experience, I just realized is that like is you are watching these movies on a computer. I don't think there's an app as far as I can tell. Right?
Nope.
There's
that's
no, like,
not- you can
TV
you
app.
can AirPlay, you can Chromecast, and there
yeah.
is a TV app. There is
Oh,
a
there
TV app.
is.
They didn't.
Oh.
They didn't
Okay.
really sell this very well, and actually, in the run up to the show, they didn't really talk about it at all. Like everybody was just saying, "Oh yeah, just Chromecast or AirPlay," which works. It's fine, but I think AirPlay is a crappy standard. 'Cause
It's
it always
janky.
fails on me.
It's janky.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not great.
I don't want to be
but you
sending
can-
movies to my TV via Wi-Fi. Like it
Via
just
Wi-Fi.
yeah. But anyway,
I mean, technically, that should be better than streaming it from a random server on the internet. Like technically, it should, but that doesn't really work out.
Yeah,
There is
yeah.
an app where if you get the pass, if you have one of the passes, I don't know if this works with the ticket, but if you have a pass, then you can like plug that into your Apple TV and you can see all the movies on your schedule. That doesn't work for everything. There are some like early preview movies some people can get access to, and some things you can only watch on your computer. But yeah, even then, Chromecast it, Apple AirPlay it. There are ways to get it to your TV. It's not like impossible.
interesting. So when I say AirPlay, I use AirPlay all the time for like YouTube videos and stuff or
Yeah.
like Twitter videos. But like whenever I've tried AirPlaying like something longer length, it just has been a pain. So I'll look
there's a
into
lot
it,
of
but I
pain.
don't think they made it easy. That's kind of my perception, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I'm willing to be wrong about it. But anyway, some more thoughts on the Sundance thing. So okay, Devindra's talked about Flea and Users. What else do you want to talk about, Devindra?
Sure. One movie that I was not expecting to love, but it is the feature directorial debut of Gerard Carmichael, the comedian. And it's a movie called On the Count of Three. This is a lovely movie about two guys. They're best friends. They're bros, bros to the end. Literally, because this is a movie about them forming a suicide pact at the beginning of the movie, and the entire movie is them leading up to completing that suicide pact. And yeah, this movie is dark, absolutely, because literally the first shot is Gerard Carmichael holding a gun up to Christopher Abbott, just like they're in standoff mode. That is
Right,
the first frame of the
John
movie.
Woo style, right?
Yep. And that is it. That's you're in the movie, and that's it. Like they're basically they've made this commitment to themselves. Not a huge spoiler. They end up giving themselves like just the day, like something they need to finish. Will take them to the end of the day. So it's really about these two guys. They're committed to killing each other because they love them. They love each other so much. Having their final day. And what would you do with that last day of your life? And it's a dark film, but I also find it like really sweet and really hopeful because these two guys, like they love each other, right? They are best friends. They will, I mean, a lot of people will say, I'll kill for you. Like these guys will literally kill for each other. and by killing each other. And Gerard Carmichael, fantastic in this. Christopher Abbott, we just talked about him with Possessor, astounding in this because the movie opens up with him being broken out of out of an asylum, and it's him like just trying to. He's somebody who had recently tried to kill himself, and it's him just like trying to come back into the world and figure out like what's the value of their lives. I think is a really fascinating film and a really entertaining film despite being so dark, but it is like it is in many ways also Suicide Trigger the movie because it is these guys talking about the you know the idea of just ending things. It's not so bad at times, and I feel like I don't know. I don't know how that's going to hit certain audiences, but I think it's really original, and it reminds me a lot of like maybe a Safdie brothers thing because it just like it is crazy. Like this movie goes places I did not expect. Has a great cast too. Tiffany Haddish is in here. JB Smoove, Henry Winkler. You know, just great people, but doing dramatic roles. So check it out when it's available. I don't know if anybody's bought it yet, but I assure you, you guys in particular will love this movie.
All right. Well, that's On the Count of Three, and it's a movie that Devindra saw at Sundance this year. And what else you watch at Sundance you want to talk about, Devindra?
I saw Prisoners of the Ghostland, which is a movie I was super excited about because it is the combination of the Japanese powerhouse Gonzo filmmaker Sion Sono with Nicolas Cage. And on paper, I think everything about this movie should just work. You know, I was ready to just sit back and just love the insanity. Have to say, it was not as insane as I was expecting. It is sort of a it's sort of like Mad Max meets a spaghetti western meets a samurai movie at times. Like it's just all over the place. I was never bored with it. I was always entertained. But there's not enough of like the cagey antics you want from a Crazy Cage movie. Like it is more propulsive than a movie like Mandy or something, but I actually think Mandy, you know, actually had like an emotional core to it. It was actually trying to do something, whereas this movie is just kind of like all over the place at times. And I'm a little disappointed because I love Sion Sono. I think he's made some like crazy ass shit like Tokyo Vampire Hotel. I talked a bit about this at some point. He was, I think, in the early 2000s, he did Suicide Club, which is just an insane movie. I expect more Gonzo stuff from him. Apparently, the story is, I believe he suffered a heart attack as they like began production of this movie. So I almost feel like I wonder if like some of it is just restrained because he was just like he had to like keep himself reined in a little. But it's entertaining. I just expected more from a movie where like Nicolas Cage is wearing a leather suit that looks like an Elvis outfit. It is. And he has bombs around his body that will explode at specific points, including 2 bombs around his nuts. Like this is that movie. This is a movie where his job is to go rescue
Nut
a
bombs?
girl. Nut bombs. Yeah, there are nut bombs. And you know, nut bombs may go off in this movie. And use your imagination. Use your imagination. This is it's a crazy movie. It's a lot of fun. I just, you know, I've seen Sion Sono go crazier, go wilder. And given where Nick Cage is right now, like where he is just like doing some really fascinating indie work, I kind of expected him to go a little harder here. But hey, it's worth watching. I just didn't love it.
Well, there's your poster quote. Nut bombs may go off.
Nut bombs.
Prisoners of the Ghostland. It stars Nick Cage. I heard fairly mixed buzz about this one coming out. I thought it would be like, oh, this is amazing. You got to check it out. And that was not what the reaction was online, sadly.
I wish it was. I would have liked to like it more. Yeah.
And anything else, Devindra?
Last one, real quick. Apparently, a surprise movie that was added to Sundance is In the Earth, the new Ben Wheatley movie, which he made during the pandemic. So it is a COVID movie. It's a movie that it's a movie about basically 2 scientists who have to go deliver a message in a world that's ravaged by a virus, and there's a lot of like COVID stuff happening, like extreme sanitation. It's a movie that kind of explores the idea of what would happen if COVID crippled society even further, you know, and we had to go live out in the wilds in a way. It did not work for me at all. A lot of people are explaining or talking about this movie like Annihilation or something, and I just feel like there's no real emotional core to it. It is just kind of a lingering movie that feels really repetitive at times. The best thing I can say about it is that The performances are pretty solid. Joel Fry is the star of this. He's from Game of Thrones and a couple other things, and his foot gets fucked up in this movie. And this is a movie where Joel Fry's foot is repeatedly damaged and destroyed and mangled, and that is for me the high point of the movie because it felt like something was actually happening. But yeah, it is, I'm hit or miss on Ben Wheatley. I don't love all his things. I know people love his style. To me, he's like a little too cynical, a little too like just not even dark, but too like hopeless in a way. So I hated High Rise. We talked about Free Fire. I feel like that worked a little more. But yeah, High Rise just felt like misery porn, the movie for me.
Yeah.
So this is not quite that. And I think it's trying to be experimental. It's very low budget. They could only do so much while shooting during the pandemic. It is a movie that mostly takes place in a forest because it's the only safe place to shoot. I just wish more happened in it. And it is also a movie that heavily relies on strobe lighting to the point where if you're epileptic, you probably should just not even watch this movie because strobing is like a main thing this movie does to really generate effects and, make up for visual effects. So yeah, I was disappointed, but looking at it, everybody seems to love this movie, or at least a lot of critics like this movie. So maybe I'm just the outlier here.
You guys seen Kill List? You guys are a fan of Kill List?
Yeah, I like Kill List.
Great,
yeah.
great
That movie
movie.
is dark, but in
Yeah.
a way that is fascinating.
Yeah. Great movie. Anyway, I'm sorry you did not like Ben Wheatley's newest film, In the Earth, which debuted at Sundance this year. That's what Devindra's been watching at Sundance. I'm going to try to catch one or two more Sundance movies rest of the week.
I'll try to catch Coda like before that's gone.
Yeah, it's a unique opportunity. It's a unique opportunity to that there's this like highly prestigious festival that like we can all now participate in. Jeff. Anyway,
Yeah, I'm in.
let's get to weekly plugs. We're gonna do weekly plugs. Let's do weekly plugs. Weekly plugs. Plugs. Let's do weekly plugs. Plugs. Weekly plugs. This is the part of the show each week where we plug something we've created in the last week or something that we're just a fan of. We don't even have to have been involved, but mostly it's stuff we've created. This week, I want to recommend an interview I had with another podcast producer, Dallas Taylor, who created a podcast called 20,000 Hertz. You guys heard of this podcast? Really cool podcast. He explains the origins of sounds. Like the Star Wars blaster or Siri, or one of the most viral episodes he ever did was about the creation of the Netflix sound, like the ta-ta sound at the beginning of the Netflix thing.
Yeah.
Would you guys know what the that thumping sound was in Netflix? Do you guys any guesses as to what that was?
No.
It's the guy who created the sound. It's him hitting his ring against a wooden table. And they just kind of like, remixed it, sweetened it until it became the thump that you hear at the beginning of every Netflix thing. Every Netflix
Yeah,
stream.
it's like the TIE Fighter sound was a broken air conditioning at ILM, and they like banged on some wires to make the laser blasts. And I dig all that kind of the sound work in general is fascinating because you can abstract something to the point where you really are not hearing what you think you're hearing.
What was fascinating to me about the conversation is Dallas Taylor created 20,000 Hertz in order to elevate the art of sound, in entertainment, right? Like TV, movies, everything like that. And he had it from the perspective of like often when a TV show is doing sound, right? Like sound often is like an afterthought. Like if you're shooting a TV show, it's like, oh yeah, and on the way to it being on streaming, like we're gonna put it through the sound, folks. And he was saying like, if sound is being disrespected in a medium in which there's only two senses, sight and sound, then we are really in trouble. And so he created 20,000 Hertz to like, increase people's appreciation of sound. Anyway, it was a great interview, and I would recommend checking it out. It's on Culturally Relevant, my podcast where I talk with cool people around the internet. Devindra Hardawar, what's your weekly plug?
Actually, two quick things. The Engadget podcast, we just recently did a thing on the whole GameStop and Reddit day trader fiasco and everything. And this is not, I'm not a finance guy. So this is a topic I actually need a lot of help decoding. So we talked with Mike Futter, the author of the Game Dev Business Handbook and the co-host of the Virtual Economy podcast, to kind of break it
Mike
down for us.
Futter.
He's a good guy.
He's been on DLC multiple times. He's a great.
Love
guy.
him.
Yeah.
Love him. Great guy. So yeah, he helped us break down like the financial side of it. And we also talked to somebody who is an anonymous member from Wall Street Bets. And he gave us like the on the ground info there.
Did you land deep fucking value, Devindra? No,
don't even. Like, it's just we got the anonymous voice and everything there, so nobody can tell who it is. Nobody knows. So there's that. And also, just real quick, I wrote up something about the way Sundance is actually working this year, and they're doing more VR stuff in a way. I didn't talk about any of the VR experiences so far because they just haven't been that great, but they're doing this thing where you can go to like a virtual cocktail room in your web browser and go talk with people. But if you have a VR headset, you can also visit that webpage in VR. It'll load up as a WebXR environment, and you will be just walking around that cocktail party and talking to people. So it's kind of wild. I did some demos of it. I haven't actually had time to like do it in the show, but I hope to like meet up with friends and do like a virtual Sundance chat at some point.
I'm pretty sure this was your weekly plug last week as well, but you know what, Devindra, I'll allow it.
Yeah.
Because we've been talking about Sundance, so that's cool.
I completely forgot. Nothing matters anymore. But I actually I actually got it out there, so that's a thing.
Nice.
The best thing about that VR cocktail party thing is the proximity audio of you just hearing people go, does anybody want to buy my movie? Anybody want to buy my movie?
Please buy my movie.
Jefferson Kanata, your weekly plug.
Hey, I do a science show that is liberally sprinkled with comedy. Some people call it a comedy show with a helping of science. Whatever your inclination, you can learn something and laugh along the way on a show that I do called We Have Concerns. It's a weekly show. You can find it at wehaveconcerns.com. We have a good time. We have fun. We are irreverent, but I think we actually do, take a look at actual science stories and psychology and anthropology and all kinds of fascinating topics that don't really make the front page, but are really, really interesting. And we make jokes. So check it out. wehaveconcerns.com.
Great. Those are our weekly plugs this week. Let's get into our review of The White Tiger. Give me a second, folks. Okay. After the third ad insertion point, I can just relax a little bit. All right, here we go. That was from the trailer for The White Tiger. It's streaming right now on Netflix. I'm going to read the plot summary from IMDb. An ambitious Indian driver uses his wit and cunning to escape from poverty and rise to the top. An epic journey based on the New York Times bestseller, end quote. This is by director Ramin Barani, and it was based on the book by Arvind Adiga. So, Devindra Hardawar, let's start with you. Just curious about your thoughts on this film. I think you'd actually seen it before us, and I'm curious if you'd like read the book or had any exposure to this story before you watched the movie.
No,
just
I haven't read the book.
Yeah.
The main thing was Ramin Bahrani, who I love. Like, I love him as a filmmaker. Man Push Cart, Chop Shop. Like, those were films, documentaries I watched. Those were like, what, mid-2000s?
Yeah.
And like, he cemented himself as a really interesting filmmaker. He most recently did the that terrible Fahrenheit 451 adaptation on HBO, which was just a complete waste of time. But I like him as a filmmaker, and I was interested in
He also
seeing
did
what he
99
do next.
Homes, which is a solid movie about
pretty
the
good.
subprime mortgage crisis, if I recall correctly. Yeah, great Michael Shannon performance in that movie. Yeah,
Great. He knows how to get like good stuff from Michael Shannon. It's just too bad about Fahrenheit 451. But yeah, I was really interested in this because of him, and also because of the story. Because I don't think the Indian experience has really been explored like this, specifically like the way the low caste folks are just shit upon in that society, and the way that structure works, and the way like being a servant to somebody is just like a thing. Like it's a thing people expect you to be, and in many ways you're raised to be it. So to me, this felt like it could be the Parasite, of India, basically, right? And I don't think it's quite there. I think it's really well acted, and I think there's some really fascinating stuff here, and it doesn't shy away from just the level of poverty that a lot of Indians and that entire country is living through. But I also wonder if some of it may seem a little like poverty porn. The perspective just seems I believe the author is Indian American, but I'm not sure like how much of his experience is actually from the low caste folks. So I'm always like I try to be conscious of that. Like I don't want it to seem like anything about class like this is looking down on people or talking down on people. And I
Right.
don't think it gets there, but I think it ends up being more like maybe more like a film like The Joker when it ends up talking about inequality in a way. Like it is making a very specific point, and it gets to be a very violent point at one time. And in a way, it also feels a bit like Goodfellas. Like it feels structurally like a crime movie at times too. It is all those things. I feel like it could have focused a little more, but I'm glad I watched it. I think the performances are fantastic. Like it raises some interesting questions, and I think this this side of India, the story of India, is something that people should be more aware of, because we typically only see Bollywood India, or we see it through the eyes of like white filmmakers, like through Slumdog Millionaire.
Right.
Like that's an Indian movie that it won an Oscar, right? Because a British guy directed it. In a way, whereas a lot of Indian cinema does not get that much respect. This is in another way does feel like an outsider coming in, but it's at least people who maybe are more in tuned and more sympathetic with the people they're actually covering. And
This
Yeah.
movie straight up takes a swipe at Slumdog Millionaire.
it does. It
yeah.
does. Yeah.
I think it's a great call out, Devindra, that like when you're watching a movie like this, you should just be aware of who's making it. It's not it's a good thing to be aware of. Ramin Barani is, by the way, an Iranian American who's born in North Carolina. So it's not saying like that. Therefore, the movie's bad or it invalidates his point of view, but it's just good to know who is behind the film and what perspectives they might bring to it. That said, Jeff Kanata, curious what you thought of The White Tiger.
Well, Dave, I guess you could say my thoughts about The White Tiger are best summed up in the form of a limerick.
Fancy that, Jeff. Fancy that.
I was mesmerized by Balram from the second the movie came on. The best rise and falls, Goodfellas, et al. White Tigers in that pantheon.
Wow.
Love it.
Okay.
I'm shocked
nicely
you didn't
done.
like it. I thought this movie was incredible. I loved it, and I'm sad that you didn't love it as much.
I mean, I liked it. I liked it, Jeff. I liked it just fine. But let's just say I have certain things that just like hold me back a little from fully loving it, because I start to wonder about who the audience of this movie is for. I start to wonder, like, is this movie selling a specific idea and a specific heroic story to white Netflix audiences or something? Like it's a lot of things going on, because hey, to me it's something I have to think about too, because let me think about my family, right? My family, there's a lot I don't know about my family coming from India. I know basically, and there are records somewhere of this, but my family is likely from Western India. There were families who went all over the world basically to be indentured servants to the British and in British colonies. And my family was a group of that who went to Guyana in South America. And that's where the actual observable history of my family can be cut off. But let's just say things probably weren't good for my family in India for us to like sail around the world in a very, dangerous. People don't immigrate like that if things are going well for them. So I think about this too, because it's like, in a way, this is my family comes from very potentially very poor areas of India. I don't know. I absolutely don't know. What I do know is when people try to go back from South America and elsewhere, go back to their Indian families, to their villages, people rejected them. They didn't want them to come back because they felt like they had betrayed their family. So then all of a sudden they were isolated and out in different places. So anyway, this movie is hitting me in many different ways. That's all. But I do like it.
Sure. Yeah. No. And I guess I mean I am the white Netflix audience, so I take my opinion with a grain of salt, because I was blown away by this movie. I just thought it was
Mhm.
so incredible, and in literally every aspect. I mean, I thought the performances were incredible, top to bottom. I thought the way the movie is filmed and shot, each
Beautifully shot.
the way
Incredible.
it's the
Yeah.
lit, the lens choices, how where the camera is placed is absolutely exquisite. I mean, I was on the edge of my seat from the word go, from the first like beat of
Yeah.
music that drops in at the beginning. And you're right. I mean, I referenced it in my limerick as well. Like it feels like Goodfellas set in India. It's a rise and fall story without the fall. And to me, it is every bit as good as any one of those movies you want to mention, Scarface or Casino, or whatever that genre, that subgenre is. Like this movie, to me, is as good as any of those, as intriguing. And I mean, I was so wrapped up in the story of this kid, who, by the way, this actor is like the second thing he's ever been in, and he carries this movie. It is incredible, the work he does, and you see him completely transform over the course of it. It is, I mean, I was absolutely, if this movie had come out a month earlier, it would have been in my very high on my top 10 list.
Oh,
I thought it was absolutely incredible. I loved it.
Yeah, I'll say some quick thoughts and then we can get to spoilers. I also have to say I really enjoyed it. I thought the main actor, Adarsh Gurov, who plays Balram, is just incredible. I mean, we'll talk about it during the spoilers, but there's one scene in particular where I just thought, like, this is one of the finest performances I've seen, in the last year.
Yeah, I was reading an interview with him, and he like went to the audition on a lark because he like wanted to meet the casting director. He'd only done like one other thing. I mean, it's an incredible story.
Shoot your shot, people. Yeah.
I found it to be thoroughly engrossing. I just was never bored the entire time. And it's interesting, Devendra, you bring up the comparison between like Parasite and Joker. That is the headline that Siddharth Adlakha uses in his Polygon review. He says Netflix's The White Tiger is more like an Indian Joker than like Parasite. And we actually tried to get Siddharth on this episode of the podcast. He was busy doing Sundance stuff, but would love to have him on again this year. But I do think that it tries to transcend kind of the genre and the story to become like this bigger commentary on the nature of class and on the nature of subjugation, and politics, and caste. And I don't know that it quite gets there. And I think the reason for this comparison between Joker and Parasite is like Joker, to the extent that people enjoyed that film, I actually think our review of Joker was pretty negative, if I recall, on this podcast. Like
pretty negative.
Yeah,
we ripped it in half.
But to the extent that people liked it, it's kind of an interesting character study. I mean, Joaquin Phoenix won an Oscar for his performance in that film, right? So it's
also because he was a guy who thought he was this character, right? I think that was our big hook with it. Is that I know life is hard, man.
Are you
like
talking about who are you
the
talking
Joker
about?
character?
The Joker guy. Yeah,
I'm talking about Joaquin Phoenix's character. I
Yeah.
forget what was his even name, but he thinks he is this guy, whereas actually seeing somebody rise up who is literally treated like dirt, and who is only looked on as a servant and as a dirty servant, that hits a lot harder.
Right. So I think it certainly succeeds at like being kind of an interesting character study, right? And then the question is like, does it go beyond that to kind of become like a broader commentary on society? One of the weaknesses of the film, I think, that a few people have pointed out is that it takes place like over a decade ago, and the world that he's kind of predicting, like his predictions about like China and India's ascendancy in the world stage were like back then prescient, but today we know how powerful those countries are. So it's like it's not really like, oh wow, what a bold statement that these countries might be like bigger than the U.S. one day. It's like we're already kind of seeing it happen to some degree today. So that kind of robs the social commentary of some of its teeth. But overall, I mean, I had a great time watching this film. It's
Mhm.
worth it just for the main performance alone. And as you guys point out, a lot of the filmmaking decisions are just really innovative and surprising. I would recommend it. So that's my
I mean,
thoughts
I
on
think
The White
all
Tiger.
of the performances.
Mhm.
I really do think there's not an actor in the movie that isn't putting in incredible work. It
Right.
is-
Yeah.
We should point out.
I think there's
Yeah, go
Mhm.
ahead. Go ahead, Devendra.
I do think like the weak link for me is maybe Priyanka Chopra, just because her character feels weird in a way, right? Because she's a character who both tries to be like the good liberal Indian in a way, but she's Indian American, so she's coming into this also from her outsider perspective. And
I thought
you
that
know,
made her great for the role, to be honest. Like I thought that made her
yeah,
like she kind of but you're right. I feel like she doesn't fit in, quote unquote, with the even just like an act like a style.
Mhm.
You know, the all these other characters have kind of a certain style in terms of their acting and performances, and she didn't fit in. But I thought that's kind of like part of
Mhm.
intention of the movie is
That's
to
part
make
of
you
the
feel.
That was kind of the
Yeah.
point, right?
Yeah,
Like she
that's what
doesn't
I
do
fit in
feel like-
there.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
she doesn't fit in that world, and she's an influence on Ashok that is trying to kind of push him into modernity, and he's being pulled back by his own family. And I don't know,
Yeah.
I thought that was all effective.
But Devendra, go
Mhm.
ahead.
Like-
Finish your thought.
Well,
yeah.
no, it's just the nature of her performance, but also she is a producer on this movie too, and I do feel like it almost feels like her character ends up being like the good one, for the most part, because she does do some shitty things towards Balaram as
Yeah.
well, and like it is like I just feel like there's something there, but I'm also I am not super impressed with her as an actor either, so that's just me.
I thought Rajkumar Rao, who plays Ashok, is great. I mean,
amazing,
he
dude,
just
amazing.
the way he kind of conflicts with everyone, like has conflicts with his father, his family. I love the
Mhm.
dynamic between him and his brother. Like, what a stark contrast between the two of them.
And
Uh,
everything is so understated and grounded and real with him. It's like on paper, excuse me, on paper, a lot of those lines that he has, a different actor could have really pushed at and
Mhm, mhm.
forced and made into a meal, and he just throws everything away. It's really natural and beautiful, and he's such a contrast to everybody else in the movie. I was so
Mhm.
great casting, but also just a phenomenal performance, I think.
He's also technically, I think, more of a comedian than a dramatic actor in India.
Hmm.
Like my parents
Wow.
love his comedies, so like he is, bringing some really interesting energy to the movie.
All right. Well, it sounds like we all think you should check out The White Tiger on Netflix. Let's dive into spoilers for the film starting right now.
Now you're looking for the secret.
You're gonna see this coming.
No,
But you won't find it because, of course,
you're not gonna see this coming.
you're not really looking.
I have been puzzling over how it works.
You don't really want to work it out.
Who's in the box?
I have been dying to tell you. I want to tell you my secret now.
You want to be fooled.
So I think we've given a pretty good sense of what is great about this film, what we like about it. The scene I was referring to, by the way, is the scene when he signs the confession.
That's
Yep.
You know,
amazing.
it's and just like
And
the
how
camera
it's
is like
shot.
yeah,
Ugh.
ultra wide angle, like right up on his face,
Right on his
It's
face. Oh man.
an amazing scene.
So
and
powerful.
And when he comes outside, it just his reaction when he goes outside is like it doesn't. He's very angry. He's kind of like howling in pain, but it doesn't feel over the top. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It feels just like kind of like what someone trapped in that situation might feel. So many things to like about this movie. It's very engrossing. But let's talk about some of the potential issues of this movie. And I think Devendra, you hit on one of them, which is like, who is this movie for, right?
Mhm.
And presumably, it's not for people who live in India because they don't need all the stuff that's explained to them in the movie, right? It really does feel like
Mhm.
it's for American audiences or white audiences.
It's a Vox article about caste, relations in
Right. And whenever a movie takes that position, you kind of just gotta. I'm not saying therefore dismiss
Sure.
everything the movie says outright, but it's just like you just gotta be a little skeptical of like, is this portraying India in a fair light or in a way that has nuance to it? And often the answer is no. I mean, to bring up another example, it would be like Mulan, right? This is a movie that I mean, the movie is pretty bad. Okay, the Mulan movie is pretty bad. The new one that came out last year, and it's not for people who are Chinese because they talk in such like declaratory ways about like I will bring honor to my family, and it's like no one talks like that. Like you're only talking like that if you're talking to people who wouldn't necessarily know what it is. And so
Mhm.
so you just got to be skeptical of a movie that like kind of is trying to give you this thing. Another example, by the way, Crazy Rich Asians. But the thing with that is you had an outsider, right? She's going,
Yeah.
the main character is
Yeah.
going into Singapore. She doesn't know what she's walking into. And so, like, everything can be new to you, the audience, and the character. So, just something to keep in mind as you watch a movie like this is like if it's for a perspective that seems like an outsider to this society, just like be skeptical of some of the claims that it makes. There was an article over at well, let me pause there for a moment. Devendra, do you have
Mhm.
any further thoughts on that topic?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Like, hey, I have to raise my alarms because I care so much about like actual legitimate representation and accurate portrayals of multicultural, societies in general. Like, this is something that just really matters to me. Um, I can't say like I've never been to India. I don't have family in India. I don't have like direct experience there, so I can't say like how accurate it is. But I do think like as somebody with Indian heritage, I look at it as a country in a way that feels like, man, we are just failing so many people in a way. It feels like civilization has let India down because of the level of poverty that exists and the way that it just can't really move forward as a society, and the things about the political corruption that's widely known. Like, that's not even overblown here. Like, that is something that exists within the country. And the way, even though the caste system is technically illegal, like the structure of it is still in place, and people still think they're basically trapped by this identity. And yeah, it just, looking at anything like this makes me just really sad about the state of affairs in India. But I don't think this movie is necessarily unfair in that respect.
Dave, I know you were bringing up Mulan as a illustration of your point, but do you really think that this movie? I think it doesn't even remotely come close to Mulan in that regard, right? I mean, there's a much more nuanced inner life on display here from all the characters, not just the lead.
Yeah,
I think that
it helps that the
everyone is
movie
struggling with these
it,
issues.
it helps that the movie's actually good. You know what I mean? Like it's an
Yeah,
engaging film.
yeah.
So yeah, I agree. This movie is not as bad as Mulan. So I will definitely give you that. I've been reading some critiques of the film, and I think we've all made clear like we can't really necessarily speak to these. I mentioned Siddhanth's review of the film, and one of his critiques was like that the movie doesn't really do that much to address actual Indian politics. Like it's
Sure.
very half-baked depiction of the politics. Nothing interesting to say there. There was a piece at NPR that I thought was interesting called "What Indians Who've Known Poverty Think of Netflix's The White Tiger Movie."
Mm.
And there's a couple of objections that people raised to the movie here, and I thought it's just worth considering. Like we can't really comment on the veracity of these, but like it's their perspectives worth considering. So Vaishali Shadangul, who's the founder of the fashion house Vaishali S, left her hometown of Vidisha, about 500 miles from Mumbai, as a 17-year-old with only the clothes on her back and the burning need to escape the limitations of a small town. And she says here, quote, "I dislike the way the movie portrays poor people. I thought it catered to the white Western gaze, reinforcing stereotypes that the poor are helpless. India is a country with the harshest social divides, but I disagree when Balram says that the only way the poor can enrich themselves is if they follow a life of crime or politics. He feels no remorse even when he kills his employer because it enables him to transcend the cycle of poverty. I think that's a dangerous message to send, and one that detracts from the years of untiring effort, discipline, and the sheer passion that many poor people use to rise above the circumstances," end quote. I did think that was kind of an interesting perspective. Like he states very clearly the thesis at the end of the movie. He's like,
Yeah.
you can only get ahead by like killing, like murdering people, or doing or being like a politician, and
Yeah.
that seems to be the thesis of the movie. And I guess what this person in this article is saying is actually like it's possible to get ahead using just hard work and decency. And
Potentially, yeah.
one watching this movie might like come away that like it's such a corrupt society that you're like it's so structurally fucked that you can't do anything. But yeah,
I do think this is a point where
Go
it's
ahead,
like
Devendra. Yeah.
that's the message of this character. What this character believes. I think the movie also gives us enough to be like, this is a guy who is desperate to get ahead, hyper capitalism, embracing capitalism in its most extreme way is really his only path, and that's his life view. I don't know.
Right,
But this is the
he's not
thing.
necessarily representative of everyone.
Right,
But the thing
right.
is, here's the thing, though. Okay, I want to ask you guys, what did you guys make of
Yeah.
that last scene? Because that last scene, he kind of is telling the story. He's walking out front, and he's kind of giving his whole life story. And he's like, I'm the boss. I'm super cool. And then he walks off screen, and all these people are just staring at the screen. All the people at his taxi company are
Yeah.
staring at the screen.
Because
My
they're
in-
now his servants, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
My interpretation of that was like, yes, he is a slightly better sort of master, ruler, whatever than the
Mhm.
people over him. But ultimately, there's still, 50 dudes under him, each of whom may one day want to get ahead as well.
Mhm.
And so kind of the cycle is going to continue. That was kind of my interpretation. Jeff Canada,
Yeah,
do
yeah.
you have a sense of what'd you make of that last shot?
I mean, to me, I get the same feeling from this movie that I do watching something like The Wolf of Wall Street.
Mhm.
Right? I don't come away going, boy, he made all the right decisions. Like he has
Yeah.
he has conquered a capitalistic goal in a lot of ways that he set out to do. But I don't believe that it's the movie is telling me this is the way to do things.
Right.
Bravo
For sure,
for
yeah.
this guy. I feel like that is an unsettling final image intentionally, right? It is an unsettling moment of like, well, who has Balram really become? Where are we now? Like, is he did this thing that he wanted to do, and he became the thing that he kind of realized wasn't so great. He's doing it in a different way, maybe a more noble way. He's treating the people that the kids that his people kill on the street, a little
Right.
bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
respect,
job, Balram, I
yeah.
guess. Like
I thought
it's-
that was a weird note. It's like kind of like, I guess you're slightly better than the terrible people. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
it's like-
but you're still kind of like subjugating
Yeah.
them in some way, right?
You lost a
Yeah.
son, but your older son has a job now. It's amazing.
Right.
I think the thing that really left me a little cold on this movie is just the fact that it just kind of ends. Like we spend all this time of him. We know at the beginning, the opening scenes are like, oh, he's successful. He has a taxi company, right? How does he get there? And then we see how he gets there, and the movie just kind of ends. And I would have liked a little more. I would have liked a little more of an exploration of like what he was doing and what all this turned him into.
Well, I think the decision to use the whole like writing the letter to the Chinese premier thing,
Mhm.
that felt like not like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think that lived up to. I was like, oh, this must be building up to something interesting, and then
Yeah.
nope.
I
not-
thought it was an incredible framing device in
Yeah.
the beginning.
Right.
Like that the ideas that he's expressing and the way he's expressing them was like, wow, that's really compelling, and I'm totally drawn in. But you're right.
It went
Payoff is
nowhere.
basically he like talks to him as he's getting out of the car. Like
Well,
yeah,
I
it's like
think-
that was it. That was the reason
Yeah.
that we did the whole framing device. Like,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's part of the point too. Like he builds himself up in this letter, and it sounds like bullshit at the beginning too, right? Like it's bravado, and then like he gets to this guy, and the guy's like, "Who are you?
Yeah,
What? Oh,
yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
that's nice."
But I think the thing
I
is
think
like
that is
you-
purposeful,
Like
yeah.
we,
I
but
agree-
we
I
as
agree
the
with that,
audience,
yeah.
like I don't know about you guys, but I knew that this guy would never read his email. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
never,
Right, yeah.
I
The
never
idea
felt
that
like.
the guys be like, wow, he's got some great ideas. Let's set up a meeting.
I just never
you're right.
believed that it was
Right.
possible that like he would ever come off as anything other than self-serving. Apparently, the book, I don't know if the whole book or part of the book
Mhm.
is told in the perspective of the letters. Like that's kind of, I think that that component is borrowed.
I
from the
gathered
book.
that. Yeah, I suspect
Yeah.
that that's directly from the book. It makes sense. But I liked. I mean, it gave us a reason to
Yeah.
hear his voiceover narration, which I thought added so much to the movie. And hearing him narrate from a perspective that has changed radically from what we're seeing in the moment is, is really it's Goodfellas, right? It's
Mhm,
the same kind of thing. And I don't know. I find that very very compelling.
Yeah.
I thought that all worked, but you're right that ultimately, in the end, Devindra, I do think that there could have been another section of movie
Right.
that would have been,
Yeah,
worthwhile.
and it's like Goodfellas of like the paranoia sequence, you know, or
Yeah,
something,
right,
Like
right.
and that's when to me Goodfellas gets even more interesting, and this movie just kind of stops after a certain
Yeah.
point. I'm like,
Imagine Goodfellas, but it just stopped before the cocaine sequence. You
Well,
know,
it's
like,
a, you know, like I said, it's a rise and fall story without the fall, right?
Yeah.
It's and you suspect that this dude's going to fall,
Right,
right?
yeah,
He's
Yeah.
like the guy, the other driver, right? Which ice cold move outing
Yeah.
the Muslim driver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You expect that guy, like in a Bollywood movie, that guy would come back and shoot him in the head by the end, you know, or something.
and then
Like
dance.
this would be uncut gems basically at that
Yeah,
point.
oh,
But
and he like okay. And your interpretation,
Mhm.
by the way, I assume like is that Ashok's family found this guy's family and murdered them all, right? Like that's the
oh yeah, they're
implication, right?
dead. They're dead. Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
I think he
man,
knows
that's
that.
da-
I think
man,
he knows.
that's
I think
dark.
Balram knows that at the end. You know.
Yeah.
That is dark, man. That is dark.
Well, we see it over and over. Like we see
Yeah.
it like 2 or 3 times in the movie. He knows that's what he's doing, and when he saves his cousin or nephew or whatever it is,
Mhm, mhm.
I thought that was so beautiful, and like that whole sequence where he says, "I hope he knows that to leave when I don't come back," and then he does come back at his own peril to get the kid. I thought that was awesome, and then like that whole sequence where you see them going around all the places with the red bag, just the two of them, not saying a word to each other. I thought that was so well realized that
Mhm.
I thought it was an
awesome.
interesting decision. I don't know that I've seen it like something like this, or it's rare to see it where he imagines his family getting killed. Like there's like kind of a fantasy sequence of his 2 fantasy sequences, right, of his family getting
Yeah.
murdered, and then when it actually happens, you don't see it. You know, I
Right.
just think that's an interesting like filmmaking decision of like, well, we've already showed you how we might imagine it. Now, like it's your turn to imagine it, basically.
Well,
Yeah.
another read, by the way, is that he just doesn't matter to him. Like, right, that side, like
Yeah,
he's
no,
seeing these
great.
stories, like he just doesn't know, and he doesn't.
He doesn't care. Yeah,
anything.
he's
Yeah.
lost. Yeah, he's fully broken from the family.
Mhm.
I will say one other objection that people have to the film is the depiction of caste in the film, and I think this is interesting. That basically, here's the again reading from this NPR piece, right? That like the NPR piece takes the premise that the implication of the film is that you are able to rise above poverty and caste discrimination. That is what this NPR piece presumes the film is trying to say. But
if you luck into millions of dollars, yeah.
if you look at the millions, but according to the NPR piece, quote, "This is a false narrative peddled by the movie," says Benson Nithipudi, a graduate student at Columbia University. An education, a good job, financial status, all this may help people considered lower caste to shield themselves from prejudice and physical violence, but the discrimination doesn't stop just because they happen to strike it rich, end quote. And there's this is an actual thing of people from lower caste still believe they face discrimination in the United States. This is like has been written about, reported about a few times in the last couple of years.
I've seen this happen of people I know, like international students, when they were dealing with older Indian folks who were from higher classes, like they would immediately revert to an almost like subservient way of dealing. Like they would start picking up the either professor or person's bag. So like it was a very like weird interaction I saw, and the older person from the higher caste would just accept it. It's like, oh yeah, that's how I treat this person. It is very weird to see happen in America.
Yeah, so I can understand the objection to the extent that one feels like this movie minimizes the pervasive and ongoing nature of caste throughout the world and even in the United States. But I think, Jeff, your point is also well taken that, like, you know, this is like in many ways a fantasy, and like, you know, we're not necessarily supposed to see this guy as a role model, and you know, he's not exactly like the prototypical person rising up from you know, we're getting a perspective of the world through this person's twisted lens. You know, I could see the defense being that for the film. But anyway, I do think it's interesting to reflect on like why the movie might be considered problematic by some people, but that doesn't take away from the
That
fact
doesn't
that
mean
it's,
that doesn't mean it's bad either.
it's still
I
a
would say.
highly
Like, I can-
enjoyable film. You know,
Yeah.
it's still like, wow, I had a great time watching it. Great performances, really well put together. So Anyway, but by the way, what was the Slumdog Millionaire slam you guys heard in this movie? I
Oh, it
missed it.
straight up calls it out. He says something.
Oh, like this is not
he's-
Slumdog Millionaire, right? Or
No,
something
no.
like
He
that?
says something like,
This is
"Hey,
not a game
nobody
show."
can get out of it
Yeah.
just because you answer a question or you get $1 million,
Yeah.
million rupees on a game show or some shit like it's direct rip on,
Nice.
you know.
Yeah. Interesting.
You remember that movie, guys? Like that movie is wild. It's
I
just-
I still like that movie. I have
there
a
are
soft
things I
spot.
like stylistically about it, but man, that in terms of bringing up a lot of the issues I have about Indian portrayal.
It's
in cinema,
way more problematic than this movie in my
Yeah.
opinion. But I still like it. It also launched Dev Patel's career as well.
At least
you know?
it gave
So
us Dev Patel.
It gave us. We'll always have Dev Patel. So anyway, The White Tiger. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it, Jeff. I'm glad you loved it. I thought it. I really found it to be very engaging. So
Mhm.
Yeah,
And I hope
It's just so
for
well
good
made.
things for
Yeah.
Ramin Bahrani, like moving forward. Like I
Yeah.
want him to get great projects.
any other moments from the movie you want to bring up? I feel like this movie does the thing. Okay, it does the thing where it starts in media res, right?
Yeah.
And
This movie could have started with, as far back as I could remember, I wanted to be a servant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It basically
Yeah.
could have.
Yeah. I did think it was. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
One moment I absolutely loved was, in his little tent room in the basement, the garage of the building,
Yeah.
when Ashok finally goes down there and he finds him there and they have that moment and and they sing together.
Oh,
Dude,
that's so good.
That scene is so great because Ashok sucks as a singer, but he thinks he's amazing. And then Balram crushes it with a song. And he's like, yeah, we can start a band together, man. It's like, I just loved that contrast. It was, man, it's such a, there's so many wonderful moments of Ashok feeling like he's being a good person
Mhm.
and being a complete asshole.
Oh, yeah.
He thinks he's being a great guy. And there's this level of discrimination that is, he feels like he's doing the right thing and being a good person. And inside Balram's experience, you recognize how demeaning it constantly is. I don't know. I obviously, I'm squarely in that place you guys are talking about where I, as a white American, am seeing things in this film that I haven't seen on film a lot or
Mhm.
ever. So perhaps that's exactly why you guys think it's problematic is, it is perhaps educating me in a way that is inaccurate. And
Right.
that's a problem.
I-
But man, I did feel like it brought me into a world that I wasn't aware of, and it was compelling and fascinating, and it did feel like a larger than life tale. So it didn't feel like I'm watching a documentary about India, but
Yep.
I just thought the canvas upon which this tale was told was fascinating. The manner in which it was told, the pacing, the camera, the look of the movie is exquisite. I don't know.
It's relentlessly entertaining. Like this is a movie
Yeah,
built to
yeah.
entertain, and it is very good at that. I will say, one thing I'd recommend to everybody too that really, I know, struck me recently. There was this great New York Times piece. It was a piece called "Who Gets to Breathe Clean Air in New Delhi," and it's like a audio visual. It's sort of like a mini documentary that charts these two kids as one who is very poor and one who's basically middle class as they go about their lives in New Delhi and the level of pollution that they have to live with. And I think it's really fascinating just to see, of course, the poor kid deals with significantly more, but even no matter how much money you have, you can't really fix the inherent problems in Indian cities too. And I don't know, it just kind of struck me here too. Like it reminded me of this. It is worth watching too, because the kid in that article, basically his school is a dirt patch underneath a highway, literally. Like the level of poverty is something I think just we're not fully cognizant of most of the time. And I think at the very least White Tiger does a good job of, hey, showing us some of that and making people aware of what's happening in India to a certain degree.
Jeff, I think a good analogy would be, if Goodfellas was the only movie I'd ever seen in my entire life that had Italians in it.
No,
Right,
you know what
I
I
was
mean?
almost going to make that
Yeah.
make that same observation. Like
Right.
that's like this movie. The only reason that it's problematic is because there aren't 1,000
Correct.
movies about Indians
Correct.
in
Yes.
the right. So like in the context of a whole bunch of other movies, this movie I think would be
People will be
I
like,
think
yeah,
we
it
don't-
has some problems, but like, you know, whatever. It's like a great
Right.
genre movie, you know, but
right.
because like this is many people's first exposure to many of these ideas, like caste
Right.
and so on, it kind of bears this burden, unfortunately, you know, of like,
Right.
oh wow, like is it saying the right things about the society, you know? And that's
Which
why
sucks,
I think people
right?
yeah,
That
it
sucks.
sucks.
It sucks
yeah.
that it has to like it has to have that burden because you know somebody should be able to make the Goodfellas of India, you know,
Yes.
like and not have to worry about whether the the main character is noble or does the right thing, you know, like but of course this is what
100%,
this is what we talk about when we talk about representation, and
Yeah.
it is
Mhm, mhm.
it is important to be able to have not just one or two of movies that have you know represent parts of the world. It's important to have lots of them so you can have a spectrum,
Mhm.
a gradient of stories and tales.
Yeah,
right?
agreed 100%. Agreed 100%. So, anyway, those are our thoughts on The White Tiger. Stay tuned to hear what we'll be discussing next week. In the meantime, I want to tell you that you can find more episodes of this podcast at slashfilmcast.com. Email us at slashfilmcast@gmail.com. Our theme song comes from adamwarrock.com. Our spoiler bumper comes from filmmaker and YouTuber Kyle Hillinger. Check out his YouTube channel. And our weekly plugs music comes from Noah Ross. This episode was edited by Beatty Zhang. If you want to support the Slash Filmcast, it's very easy. All you got to do is go to patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can get ad-free episodes as well as exclusive After Darks. This week on the After Dark, got a bunch of cool stuff. COVID-related topics, as I said. You know, everyone wants to talk about that, right?
Oh man,
Yeah, I know. You
so
can't wait.
exciting!
Can't
You
wait.
you
Can't
can't
wait.
wait. You can't wait. Okay, next week, current plan. We're going to talk about The Dig on Netflix. New movie. It's getting great reviews. In the After Dark, we're going to talk about Malcolm and Marie. It's getting slightly less good reviews, but it's very interesting and provocative.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
also,
what.
maybe watch some Euphoria before that too, because I think Sam Levinson is a really fascinating filmmaker. Yeah.
All right. So The Dig and Malcolm and Marie. That's what's on tap for next week's episodes of the Slash Filmcast. Again, patreon.com/filmpodcast. Thanks to everyone there for your support. Thank you for listening. We'll see you later.